Andy,
Bambos.
we are live.
We are live, Bambos. We are live. We are live. We are live.
And today we have a very special
Why do you
guest.
look so short?
I don't know. I took the cushion from under my butt.
I feel so much taller. If you take your cushion, I got to take my cushion then. I feel like this is unfairly representing the height.
Who
People
cares?
don't realize that we have booster seats here. Here we go.
We have a very special guest on today, Andy.
Yes, we do. You want to talk about him, or am I going to talk about him?
Well, I like the way you introduce. Go on.
Okay. Kirk Scott. Kirk Scott?
Kirk Scott.
Kirk Scott. I was in the U.S. for a business trip. I guess I don't even know. The years blend for me at the moment, but let's say 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5. He'll tell us. And I'm sitting down, and I love nothing more than hearing a person share a job which is so foreign to me that all of a sudden I start to think, what does that life look like? Like, how does that look? And he then tells me that he's made a he was part of a crew that made a stop motion animation film.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know stop motion animation, but it is basically taking models and moving them very, very slowly and taking picture after picture after picture till there's millions of pictures that then stream together to create a film.
Yeah.
And when he told me that, I sat and I just remember I was just fascinated. So I asked him question after question. And then I realized when we were doing this show, I close my eyes, as you know, in the night and say, who do I want to talk to, or who do I want to bring on to discuss, their lives, the things they're doing. And I thought, wow.
Let me guess. Kirk.
Yeah. Kirk hit me. I was like, I'm going to ask Kirk on because I think it's so fascinating just to kind of sort of get under the hood of what does that life look like? Like the creativity, the deadlines, the unrealized dream. Because when a director goes into such a big project, they don't really know in the end what it's going to look like. They're figuring out as they go along. And it's kind of nice to hear how it is from his side to be part of that cacophony, that chaos, and that gets created. And to see, how far he realized that A Nightmare Before Christmas would become this iconic classic that will live on for hundreds and hundreds of years. So he did that. And he also told me he did Coraline, which was his second film that Ronnie and I both loved. And he had different roles in each. We'll discuss those. But for me, it was like, wow, like that's totally cool. And we're going to discuss it with him. And it's also funny because he was the only person who sent me emails before anxious about what we might ask him, because he said, whatever he said, like, you're going to make me cry. And I was confused me for a week. I was thinking, I have to be really, really light with him or something. And then we just found out it wasn't that bad. But I think it would be cool for you, Bambus, because I know you never watch anything in the media realm, to give you a trailer of what A Nightmare Before Christmas is. So you get a sense of what he's doing, how it looks, and why at least I find it so fascinating. So let's put that on right now.
Can we put our jingle first?
Holy shit, I didn't do that, did I?
No.
So take away everything I said. We're going to start all over again.
No. No.
We've got Kirk Scott on for the hour on A Wonderful Chaos.
Unbelievable, Andy. You really messed up there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that you sort of like primed me and said, "Yeah, here we go." So you want to go ahead and we'll put this on and we'll play this for us now. Let's play it and
from
see.
Here?
Yeah, from there. Go ahead, click.
Before Christmas. This historic teaming of extraordinary talents is taking three-dimensional animation to unprecedented new heights. The result is a revolutionary new motion picture experience that will take you to a new world beyond anything you've ever imagined.
It goes something like this.
You'll meet a magical cast of unforgettable new characters, led by Jack Skellington, the king of Halloween, in a story filled with holiday cheer and incredible fantasy, featuring 10 new songs by Danny Elfman.
What's this? What's this? There's color everywhere. What's this? There's white things in the air. What's this? I can't believe my eyes. I must be dreaming. Wake up, Jack. This isn't fair. What is this?
Prepare to experience an exciting adventure in movie making and discover the astonishing new world of The Nightmare Before Christmas. Coming to theaters everywhere for the 1993 holiday season from Walt Disney Pictures.
1993. Wow. That
Wow.
was some time ago. So, without further ado, as I've already introduced him, we're going to invite him on. So, Kirk, thank you for joining us.
You bet, man. It's good to see you both.
So, my first question to you is, how long were you abused as a child?
Psychologically or physically?
Oh, man.
That's a little inside joke. Haha.
I'm laughing too hard at that notion. That's not right. I'm sorry.
Yes, my friend. Thank you for coming.
And for watching 20 episodes
Yes,
already.
you're a big fan.
Yes,
That's really cool. Yeah, I think the way we create a fan base is we invite people to come on the show, and then they basically say, I got to figure out what I'm coming into, and then they watch a few episodes. That's how we're getting our fan base. That's great. So you have made 2 movies that Ronnie and I are really in love with.
Right on.
And I say made, and I know you're very, that's absurd to say. You were part of the creation of these great films.
Yeah.
And each one is great in their own way. For me, stop motion animation, obviously, from Burl Ives doing the voiceover for all of the Christmas stuff to present.
Yeah.
But when I saw A Nightmare Before Christmas, yeah, you mentioned before we came on, it was a bit rough. It was before we started getting fluid in the motion and so on. But when you like see like that somebody's creativity can come out that far, that stretching that far, then you're like, wow, like that is just amazing. So I was really excited just to discuss with you being on set, having that experience, not even wondering to myself, did he have any clue at the time that the film would be that iconic? Like, did you already sense that? All that is what I would love to ask and get into with you.
Right on. Well, thank you, by the way. It's funny. A couple of friends of mine who worked on the film have their own podcast going on called the We Know Jack Show podcast. And they spend every episode interviewing somebody who worked on Nightmare Before Christmas and talking about their perspective on it. And it's funny, they've probably got about 40 episodes or so. And I did an interview for them a couple of weeks ago that'll come out, in a while. But almost to a person, everybody kind of had that sentiment that although we didn't know, but while we were there and in the process of making it, we certainly knew that something special and magical was happening. There was chemistry during the production. And I kind of have a theory about that because that film was made in the Bay Area. It's made in San Francisco. So they started making it in like 91, maybe mid-1990. I came onto it in September of 92 and worked on it for the last year of production as a stagehand, as PA starting out, and then it got done to the stages. And there was already a really fertile group of people, creative people that were in the Bay Area. You had ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, which was George Lucas's visual effects house, and then there was some other smaller companies around that were creating new content and doing special things. But the funny thing is that a lot of those people, when you're doing visual effects for a film, you're working on maybe 50 shots out of 1,000 in a film, and you put all your energy into getting a spaceship to crash into a planet, or something something to blow up or whatever, but you're not really embracing the or have the ability to tell a story, to actually tell a narrative story. So you had all these people who had wonderful technical skills and then creative skills that were used to doing little bits of pieces and little bits of things that were now actually able to contribute to telling a story. So it kind of gave them the opportunity to really, the animators were able to like explore a character. You weren't just animating a Ritz cracker or a Pillsbury Doughboy. You were like actually doing character development, having to express, through these, hard plastic and foam puppets and kind of thing. At the same time, because, many people animated, say Jack Skellington, although you wanted to put your own panache and spin on it, it had to be consistent. The performance had to be consistent throughout the film. So there was a big collaboration of like, okay, well, you did that and that's a gesture, then we have to, follow that through. So when I animate Jack, I'll do that kind of thing. So
that's nice. I want to touch on that for a second, because this is something that I really love and spend a lot of my time thinking about.
Yeah.
And it's like I've, in my own management of people or leadership, what I'll do is I'll find people that are good enough that I trust that whatever they come up with is whatever it was meant to be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it sounds like that was the case for you. Like they just said, "You're good. We know that you can do this. Make it happen."
Well, that was the lucky thing for me. I mean, Nightmare was my first film job, my first professional entertainment job. I had studied theater and went to college down in Orange, California, where I met a mutual friend, Ted, and that was from '87 to '91. And I had gotten out of college, and it was one of those things like I had a theater degree, which was semi-useful. You know what I mean? It ended up being very useful over my lifetime for a number of reasons. Whether it's learning technical skills and the ability to think and then build and create, but then also just the acting skills you get from that process of like, how do you read a scene? And not on paper, but in everyday life. How do you stay focused and stay in the moment? Find out that maybe people don't react well to certain approaches. So how do I change my tactic and approach so they're more comfortable? And even sometimes maybe you're not even really going for their comfort. Maybe it's like, okay, well, if this is an issue, I'm going to push it a little further because frankly, I need you to get to a point where you're either angry enough to just do the job and show me that you actually know how to do it, or just work yourself into exhaustion and frustration where it's just like, fine, then move on. Then realize you tried and I need someone else to come in and do this kind of thing.
Would you have found that there were situations like that where there were people doing the animation that weren't capable of living up to what was expected of them, and then they kind of worked their way out?
I observed that a lot. I mean, I've been producing for the last couple of years, which has kind of been part of the evolution of my career in this business. And so, I can't say necessarily that I've used those skills in that role specifically, as far as that example. But in other ways, yeah, no, you definitely, you kind of.
But I mean, like when you watch the movie.
Yeah.
You watch the movie in a way that nobody else watches the movie that wasn't part of the film.
I do. I see all the mistakes. I know, I know where it was shot in the building. I know what was behind the camera. I know where the ladder was off to the side. I know what it took. I know it was taking out of frame eventually that was, accidentally left in frame. I know that, I hung those lights, or I dropped those bugs, or I blew through a hose and made the dry ice come out. So now there's fog in the shot, So I do have a very strange, in fact, not just me, but everybody that has worked on the film and worked on that film has a very strange sense of ownership of it. You know what I mean? And can you see it? Can you
see it without those eyes? Because I thought about it like with music, and I talked about like when I heard Sting, 18 years old. I heard Branford Marsalis on the saxophone, and it was like mystery music. Like there's something going on. So then I pick up the saxophone, I learn how to play it, and then I learned it's kind of mathematical. And now I'm only listening to mathematics. So now it took away the magic in some ways, because now I wasn't listening to it as this mystical thing anymore. I was seeing that. So is it similar for you when you're watching the films now?
Yeah. I can't pull out objectively and just be an audience member anymore, which is the price you pay. But hell, it's worth it. I mean, I spent 30 years working with like fantastically creative, cool, far out people that, that probably wouldn't be accepted in a lot of other parts of society, but have found a little home in the animation world. I mean, and animation's even more kind of like this little sequestered group within the greater entertainment industry. You know what I mean? I mean, I've worked in live action and some other bigger projects, and those a lot of times can feel like construction sites. You know what I mean? You've got rough and tumble people. You've got people that are out there flirting around or just kind of goofing off, or or they're just servicing their own ego for whatever reason. And there's some of that, but if somebody pulls that kind of Hollywood bullshit in the stop motion world, most of the people go back and go, "That's not. Where's that coming from?"
Yeah,
that's not really welcome or appropriate in this environment.
So it's sort of like they're like artists that are actually working together. It sounds like
they are. I mean that's the thing that I love about it, is that you're dealing with people who are they are artists. I mean, and for better or worse, I mean, because the artist sensibility can be fragile at times,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm married to an artist, and but at the same time, artists.
Let's go into that. Like, where is
All
she
right, yeah.
fragile? Where is she fragile? Somewhere painful, somewhere that you don't want to be on.
Well, I'm not going to cry now, but I may cry later.
Andy,
Yes.
stop being a dick.
I'm not. I'm not. He asked me to. He says he wants that.
No. Well, but I'll give you an example along these lines, because Monica and I talk about this all the time. And Monica, for your listeners, is Ted, who's in your book. That's his youngest sister. So I'm friends with Andy through marrying into the greater Low clan. But artists, Monica, she got a master's degree in fine art. She spent years doing it, all the way growing up, and then done it academically. And then on her own now, she's actually gotten back into painting again during this pandemic, which is fantastic. I support that. I celebrate. I'm so happy to see her sitting at the easel again. But as an artist, you do something, you create a piece of art, and then you present it. And then once you present it, it is then up for criticism. It is then, and then it's not yours anymore necessarily. It's everybody else's to look at and own. And how do I identify that? And how is that mine? And how does that affect me?
Mm.
And that, especially like in an academic world, you'll get a critique. That's part of the class, where it's just everybody in the class does a painting or does whatever, and then one by one you go and have to show your stuff off. And in those critiques, it can be brutal. It can be like, I don't get it, or that shit, or or I really like that, or how did you do that? And and it's one of those things where you as an artist, you kind of have to get used to the fact that people are going to crap on your parade all the time. You know what I mean? Because because everybody's got an opinion. And you can't be too sensitive about it. You kind of have to be willing to take it and go, okay, fine. And it's funny because, that's what we do. I do professional at the time, where it's like, people spend weeks sometimes working on a shot, and then you finally see it in dailies, and it's like, it's great. Or it's like, okay, now we'll buy it.
So what you're trying to tell us is Monica is very defensive when you criticize her art. Is that what you're telling us?
Can we do one of the deep breaths? I love the deep breaths.
Deep breath, Bambas.
Deep breath in, guys.
Fuck you, Andy.
Hey, Kirk.
Yeah.
Of course.
I'd like to slow it down a little bit.
Sure.
Like you're very playful. You're talking really fast. Like, I'm curious to hear about the little boy.
Yeah.
Like, where did he when you became an animator? Like, how do you even go into that from the little boy? Like, what was the thing that you?
Well, I wonder. It's funny. It's something I struggled with when I first started out, because I never had any intention of going into animation. It was not a dream of mine at all growing up. I always wanted to be in show business. I mean, I grew up about an hour outside of Los Angeles. So, and I think that's a weird phenomenon that people who don't grow up in Southern California don't get, is that Hollywood news is local news. I mean, when Nicholson pulls a golf club out and smashes somebody's windshield because he's angry in traffic, that's on the nightly news, so it's not just, exploitive stuff. So that kind of fostered in me a desire to be in the business. And when you're a kid, you think the only thing that you can do is be an actor, or be a performer, So I signed up for tap dancing lessons when I was about 6 years old. Voluntarily asked my folks, I want to take dance lessons. And there was a woman in Norco, my small town that I grew up in, Mimi's Dance Studio, that taught the tap and jazz and ballet and did Polynesian dance. And, so I was, doing that kind of stuff, which was a great training ground. And I have to say, that was my passion versus sports or athletics. I never had, and I still to this day have, I don't get sports at all. You know what I mean? I try to be active, but for me, I like to go to a gym and work out, because frankly, I'm terrible at pitching or throwing or basketball or any of that kind of stuff. So, but although there's a team effort that goes into something like sports, there's also a team effort that goes into putting on like a dance recital, you know what I mean? Or putting on a play, or as further extension of my life, doing what I do for a living. And, you know, you have to practice, you have to get good at it. You have to, you know, put in all the hours, you know, you do 1,000 hours and get it to, you know, get it to a place where it's ready to present. And you know, I kind of kept bouncing around and trying to find my way in those things. But at the same time, I'm also, I just turned 50 in November. So I'm of that generation that, like, I was 10 years old the first time I saw Star Wars, which is like the great age. You know, I think that's kind of the ideal age for someone, you know. And, you know, and that kind of film, I mean, for a lot of the folks that I work with that were in their 40s and 50s when I started out in my 20s, the 33 King Kong was their inspiration. You know what I mean?
Right.
That they look at that and go, "Oh man, I saw King Kong, and I don't know what it was, but I just had to do that." For me, that was Star Wars. And then the weird irony is you know, I started wanting to absorb all that stuff. So there were publications. There was a magazine called Starlog magazine that was really popular in the early 80s that covered sci-fi and practical effects and visual effects and all this stuff. I started, you know, subscribing to that, and reading articles, and just in, you know, hanging up pictures of, you know, tear-outs that was like, you know, the guy's face melting from, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark on my wall as a kid, which I'm sure my parents were a little disturbed. But it's like, why is that image in in our good Christian household? But
Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, Mom. But then, you know, to realize that really within a few short years, in 10 years, you know, I'm hot gluing C-stands to the ground in San Francisco on Nightmare, and one of the camera operators is like, "Oh yeah, John Berg, the guy who works in the model shop, he helped animate Phil Tippett with the creature chess scene in the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars." And I just dropped my gun, bolted to my feet, and ran to him. And just like a, you know, "Mr. Berg, it's so nice to meet you. It's an honor, and you worked on Star Wars." And it's like I was beside myself. And then I realized that was the environment I was in that somehow brought me to that. Just through, you know, it's all about the path, man. I tell you, I have made some weird decisions over the years, and my career has kind of bounced around in different areas. The leaps of faith have always paid off. That's all I know.
It almost sounds like when you were cutting all these snippets and putting them on your wall, it was like a vision board.
Yeah.
Unintentionally, but yeah, I mean, I think it was putting out that vision to the universe. Like, these are things I want to know about. I want to be a part of somehow. I want to be a part of that, you know. And I know it's vain and silly and egotistical, but you know, it was fun to do theater in college because there's always that notion of, despite the work you get adulation, it's instant gratification. The audience is responding as you perform. End of the show, the polite courtesy of, "Oh, thank you, you did a great job," everything. But the first time I saw my name as a screen credit on Nightmare, like, put me into I'm gonna cry on that. Put me into this whole world of, like, how did I get into that? How you know? So I've been grateful my entire life and career for, like, just opportunity to be a part of it. So anyway, see, Andy, you made me cry.
Should we hold the silence to see if he cries more?
Yeah, we can just hold you. We have a space holding where if someone really wants to get emotional, we said let's just hold space for them.
I know.
Let's see.
No, it is beautiful. When you say that, what I hear is, in some ways, I you know, I don't know if I've cried yet about the book. Or
yeah.
And as a kid, it was always funny that, you know, my dad would always say, you know, "I hope one of my children writes a book."
Nice. All right.
That was like his dream.
Yeah.
I always laugh saying, if he knew I was going to throw him under the bus in the book, I wonder if he still would want that credit to his family name.
Yeah.
but the truth was, I always said that.
Yeah.
And
wow.
And in some ways, I don't necessarily know if I've really and I say, so I haven't really embraced that. You said before we got on there that you really enjoyed it. And I always laugh because even in the second book, I talk a lot about when someone says you're an author or this, then, you know, the way I've diminished it is by saying, yeah, there's some people that like what I write.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. owning the notion of being an artist. Monica and I have talked about this because she is an artist. She paints and creates and can create beautiful things. I have a hard time calling myself an artist because I don't necessarily know that what I physically contribute to any project is artistic. It's logistical, it's management, it's and even when I was a PA, it's just moving stuff around, it's making sure there's clear pathways and efficiencies going on, and equipment's at the ready. As a stage manager, setting up facilities, it's all about creating the space for the artists to work. But and I mean, I can claim, oh, I take pride in being in, there's an artistic element to the way you establish those and set up those kind of things, but it's nuts and bolts. I mean, it really is. Which I don't mind not calling myself an artist. But maybe I am. I don't really. It's a weird because. But
I think this is something that I get to a lot in everything we do.
Yeah.
Is that I think, and it's also a question of how I identify myself, and when we have some loading to it, like what it means to be an artist, and then we're not even conscious of all of the constructs that we've written in our brains around what that means.
Yeah.
That then we say, oh, I'm not that, because there's always one criteria out of the 5 in that grouping. I'm not, like is it in my case, it's like I'm not an author because an author actually went to school to learn how to authorship, they figured it out. I just wrote, and then it just happened to become, And Bambos, right? It was really interesting. I always laugh and say, you know what the difference between a professional and amateur is?
Yeah.
No,
well, I mean, it's getting paid, isn't it? I mean,
exactly. One charges and the other doesn't. So you could be the best amateur, but never charge. So you're not a professional yet. I think in fact, when I'm working with people, sometimes I'll force that I pay them, although they don't want to receive payment, because I say, I need you to finally own the value you're delivering. And I can't work with you unless, because I can't. Then I'm only an enabler of your unwillingness to embrace your own value. The guy who voiced over my last book, he gave me a very low price, and he was the sweetest heart guy. And I said, I won't pay you that. Either you double it, and if I double it and you don't charge anyone the same amount going forward, then I won't do the book with you.
Well, it's Monica. Monica had talked about this in the fine art world. If you go to an art show and you ask, $200 or $300 for a piece of artwork, people are going to be less inclined to buy it because they think, well, it's not great, right? Obviously, it's not priced in the great category, So if you put a $4,000 price tag on it, all of a sudden, someone's going to go, well, that's a masterpiece. I've got to have that. Obviously, it's in demand. It's of value. That's a kind of that kind of game goes on all the time. But there is a notion to it where I mean, they always encourage young filmmakers and people want to get into the business starting out, work for free. Go in and put those hours in, just pay your dues and work for free. I don't buy that at all because people are struggling all the time, and just to and when you're asking the most vulnerable people to come in and give up hours and weeks and days for nothing, they may be learning some things and picking up a sense of it, but you're always going to treat them as like, well, they're not getting paid, so frankly that they're not of value. I mean, and it's I mean, and I do that to myself when I'm not working. And I've been doing this roughly. I started in '92 working on Nightmares, so 28 years, going on almost 30 years. Of those 30 years, I haven't worked probably a good solid 5 years collectively over the course of projects. And when I'm not working, I really have to struggle with the idea that I am not worth anything, that I am not of value. And it's a mindset that I have to combat. I identify with my it's that whole notion of work identity that I am the builder, so I am important because I make things. I am the builder, and when you're not building, then you're like I'm nothing. I'm pulling. I'm sucking. I'm taking away. What I've tried to do later in life is that when a project ends and I may be in a position where I don't know what the next thing is, it's not I'm worthless. It is, anything is possible. You know what I mean? That it's just like, you know what? The opportunities are endless. You know what I mean? This isn't the end of something. This is the beginning of an opportunity to whatever I want. What have I not done yet that I'd like to try? So it's that, you know, it's hard to
I love it. Well, I mean, that's why we're here with this show. I mean, COVID hit and we're, you know, I saw the world saying suffering, this is terrible, this is the worst. I'm like, wow, what can we do now? You know, what can we do that's just fun? What would I never do if I wasn't stuck in a house for months at a time?
Yeah. This whole experience, I mean, this is we were in the middle of production. I was working on these little Hot Wheels shorts that are on YouTube that have been quite successful the past couple of years. I mean, over 100 million views kind of thing, which it's new for me. I've never worked in the internet content world before, but I'm working with some great people. I'm working with some old friends, so that's always fun. But because we were in the middle of shooting, we had to just leave everything right where it's standing and walk away. It's still sitting in a warehouse in Burbank right now. In fact, after this interview, I got to go in and start moving some stuff around to, make way for us coming back to work on this Monday. So,
I don't know if that's the best time to go back, given that the spread has just hit again. But it's crazy.
No, I'm really torn. I mean, I'm nervous as heck to go back because it is, it's the real deal. It's time to do it. But I'm also responsible for the health and safety of 20, 30 people, and it's just one of those things where that weighs on me. That does have a concern. But having had this 4 months off, it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine early on this thing that was just he's the director and the writer of the show who's this Hot Wheels things that I'm working on. That was like, man, he had some projects in the fire, and he was, think this 2020 was going to be a big year for him and everything, and he's still doing it. He's producing stuff from home and pitching new projects and getting stuff produced. As is his wife, they're both fantastically successful and doing really well. But he kind of came, early on when this pandemic, we had to meet up to get some tools out of the studio for him, and he was he's like, man, thinking back in January, we had all these plans that 2020 was just going to be this, big year and 2020 vision and all this clarity and da 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 da. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I kind of feel like maybe the 2020 vision that people were joking about in January. Maybe the pandemic has put the spotlight on what really is important. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It is this conversation. It is being with friends. It is being with family. It is being supportive. And even if you can't be face to face or hug or show that direct intimacy, we can talk and still express. My heart's open to you right now. I mean, that's what we can do. Get enough rest, do some shit around the house. I mean, all those things that you put off because they are secondary and not important because you're so busy doing your thing, that this is allowing everybody to kind of go, let's come back about 200 years and just calm down for a minute. You know what I mean? It's like, it really is just kind of just sitting around the fire and, watching the sun go down, so.
I got a question that goes back to what Bambo said a moment earlier. He said, when you're on set, do you ever feel like that childhood joy, like when you were watching Star Wars and saying, this is where I am?
It hits me in waves. It was much more, it's one of those things that a certain amount of the joy wears off over the years, but certainly early on, yeah, no, I mean, when I mentioned it in the other podcast that one of the things on Nightmare I used to like to do is, those sets are kind of like, there's usually a little pocket in there somewhere where an animator may pop up through a trap door, or there's kind of that sense that there's relief rows or mid-ground elements in the background, so you can sneak into a set. And if you kind of get down and you're like, Jack Skellington was like 18 inches high, and you get your head like right on the set and you're looking around, you're in that space. I mean, it's like being inside a Viewmaster as a kid. You're just like, oh my God, it's like, oh, this is. So, there's those kind of playful elements that do capture me. I mean, having done this as long as I have, and like I said, ups and downs, and not working, 5 years, different, collective points in my career. Monica and I moved back down to LA about 6 years ago. In fact, you were saying in the intro, we met in
Oakland.
In Oakland, 2012. I think it's maybe 2011, 2012. I think it's 2012. Right as a project I was working on for Disney that I had been, 2 years in production. I don't know if you know, but that project, they pulled the plug on that.
I knew that at that point, it was one of those moments when you had to make peace with not knowing what the future was going to be, because we discussed it quite a bit when we were together.
Yeah. And that, for a number of reasons, that project ended for me and really kind of made me go, screw it. Is this it? Am I done? Is this over? Do I ever want to come back to this again? Is it time to go be the park ranger I wanted to be? or whatever dream, whatever fantasy you have,
Yeah.
And I have thought about park ranger before, but I'm not sure. I'm too old now. But you can't, the hazard of being in this business for any amount of time. And it's also a pitfall for younger people getting into it. It's this notion that it's hit to bitch. You know what I mean? That the sooner you start complaining about shit, that's somehow indicating that you know better. That you know I've done this, and you guys are screwed. This is terrible. Let me tell you. And it's like, and that attitude is a creativity killer from the get-go. Because as soon as you assume that, you no longer absorb, you no longer receive, you no longer. You're not problem solving. You're just problem proclaiming.
Let's go to that for a moment, because I mean, it's not obviously only in your industry, but it's everywhere where the one can't allow the fact that maybe they don't know.
Yeah.
And there's been studies done which showed that the more one complains and is critical, others judge that as intelligence.
Well, it's because it's what our parents did. Right? It's what we sitting on the dinner table. I remember I'm the youngest of four, and my dad would hold court every night at the dinner table and just go, and he worked in construction and paving, so he would just sit there and this supervisor, stick in his ear, and he doesn't know, and that inspector came by, and it wasn't like Dad always had that mindset, but certainly after a long day and after a 4-hour drive in the 91, getting home to Norco and, finally sitting down and, he's just going to let it go. And I do the same thing. And that's what,
Like Kirk, guilty as charged. I remember when I used to work, I had this job in Vienna, and when I would go into the office, there'd often be this tension in the air. Yeah. And I'd always say, I don't know what's happened, but I know I'm guilty.
well, and then so here's the interesting thing that's happened to me personally, is that I left Oakland 6 years ago, kind of feeling like, again, that I was out of work. I was that kind of sense of worthlessness. I felt like the big project that was going to be the 10-year gig and a 3-picture deal that was going to bring the whole cool Nightmare crew back together again was a complete washout. So it's like, and this has been kind of on the heels of I worked on Coraline, and that was their first project, and Leica was, it was like, we're gonna have tons of work for everybody, and and it's gonna be, come here and retire in Portland, with a 30-year career working in animation. That's the case for some people. It wasn't for me, but which is fine. I was getting crusty. Bottom line is I was getting crusty, and it was starting to show, and it was starting to become a hindrance in my ability to be hireable, to be someone some people wanted to work with, and
this is a beautiful one. Can we just go there? So hold on. So what you're telling us is you were becoming your dad.
I was becoming my dad. My dad. Yeah.
Wow. And how was that for you to sort of, because now you're your dad, you're going through life, and then all of a sudden you see you're meeting the resistance, because obviously that's not the kind of attitude people want to interact with. So how'd you go through that process?
I honestly, when the project that was in San Francisco, the Disney project, when that went down, it was not a pretty ending for me. I had a very public kind of outbursting, alcohol-infused meltdown that I am thoroughly embarrassed about, and it's something that I carry around as I'm ashamed of it. I'm actually ashamed of it. I kind of put myself in, for lack of a better term, like animation jail for a couple of years, where it's just like self-prescribed. Like, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try and get on another project because, frankly, I just know that incident, my reputation leading up to that, the perception of me was was not going to be helpful in any way. And if it weren't for a couple of dear old friends that invited me down, one, the guy I'm working with, Ross Schumann, he was a production assistant on James and the Giant Peach. So I've known him since going back to the early '90s as well. He was directing a low budget stop motion feature called Hell and Back that came out on Netflix, 6 or so years ago. Said, hey, I need to reshoot the ending of my film. We've done some marketing and they didn't like the way it was. So you want to come down and be the assistant director on this, be kind of the, run the floor, which I'd never done before. And I'm like, okay, it's LA. I don't know a lot of the people down there, so I can go in and not be, burdened with the perception of who I was and my baggage and shit, my psychological baggage. And I was challenged to do something I had never done before, which was actually break down a script and to look at, what's the best order to shoot this in. And, and all of a sudden now I'm exercising my filmmaking skills, my honest to God. Okay, and you shoot the masters and then you push it for the close-ups, you shoot everything this angle, and you shoot everything, all those kind of managerial asset things. And it was wonderful to prove to me that I could do that. But in the process of that, I've met a bunch of people down here working in the Southern California, LA scene that have been working consistently, doing shows like Robot Chicken, or working on Tumbleleaf, which is another kind of kid show that was on Amazon for a while. But there's a lot of small operation stop motion going on down here, and all of a sudden I'm working with people who were 20 years my junior, who were fresh out of art school, who this was their first gig, and they were just happy as oh my God, they're enthused. And they're not questioning the pay or the hours or the working conditions, or what I mean. There's some of that evolves after time, but and all of a sudden their enthusiasm started reminding me of how I felt when I started out. And it's like, and I realized that all this bullshit that I'm carrying around was my own creating. It was my own creation. Why am I embracing it when, frankly, the joy is still there? And now that I'm surrounded by people who are enthusiastic and not crusty and curmudgeonly and angry about shit, as allowing me to be to suck off their fucking joy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you.
You're being emotionally vampiric about like, oh, great, I want that.
Yeah.
So
I found it like, and this is something I found it with a lot of people I even work with.
Yeah.
Like, I will tell them they cannot hang out with the friends they used to hang out with. I'm sorry, but those people who keep telling you all of these stories or keep bringing drugs into your life or that's over. And it's really hard because they don't realize is that when you surround yourself with a certain energy, that energy just becomes the water you swim in, and you become something you weren't even aware of.
Yeah. Well, it's like people who have severe drug addictions, heroin and that kind of thing. When they try to go clean up, and I've had a few friends that have had struggled with that. They have to cut all those ties. They can't go, they can't try and be sober and still be in that environment because it's just too many triggers, too many temptations.
But it's easier with drug addicts because it's something that we can point to that's very concrete, but it's hard to do with the ones that are actually just emotional vampires, as you say, because the world doesn't say, oh, those people are just like the addicts that we're surrounding ourselves with that create more and more of the chaos in our heads.
Yeah.
By the way, I'd love to segue to a second trailer of the other movie that obviously you've done so many, but the two that I wanted to highlight to check out the Coraline trailer, because Bambos, again, I want to introduce him to culture.
I come from village.
You come from Cyprus, right?
Yes. We just throw rocks at each other.
Bambos doesn't watch anything. He never watched a Netflix show, anything. This is not his thing.
Coraline Jones always dreamed of finding a better world. A world more exciting than this. But never did she imagine that she'd discover it in her own home. A parallel place
We've been waiting for you, Coraline.
where parents are always fun
I love your garden! Can't believe you did this!
and everything is so good
What's shaking, baby?
it just can't be real.
Mom? You're just in time for supper, dear.
You're not my mother. My mother doesn't have... But
Buttons? Do you like them? I'm your other mother, silly.
You probably think this world is a dream come true.
My name!
But you're wrong.
You do like it here, don't you, Coraline? You could stay here forever. There's one tiny little thing we need to do. Black is traditional.
she's got this whole world where everything's better, but it's all a trap.
You may come out when you've learned to be a loving daughter.
From Henry Selick, the director of The Nightmare Before Christmas, comes a world of extraordinary imagination. Spooky secrets.
Who are you?
You're in terrible danger, girl.
And daring discoveries.
I still have to find my parents to set them free.
When adventure comes knocking,
Choo choo.
there are some doors that should never be opened. Coraline, written for the screen and directed by Henry Selick.
So
I didn't catch your name there, Kirk, for some reason.
Well,
when you see that, what comes up for you?
Oh man, a lot comes up for me. I mean, I was watching that clip, kind of looking at the clock. It's like, okay, well, I've got another 10 minutes here. So, there's a lot comes up for me on that. For me, that was a real chance of redemption, professionally and career-wise. My personal story on that is I had been working at Disney as a production assistant, which at a certain point in my career, I'd kind of like, stop motion doesn't happen, or didn't when I started out. It was one of those things that kind of, you get a feature every 2 or 3 years, and you know, which if you're lucky, they can go back to back, and you can kind of keep busy. I had hit a point in my career around 2000 where I didn't know what I was going to do. There was no kind of real opportunities coming up in what a lot of the things I had already kind of trained in and done. And I'd done some CG stuff, but I kind of walked away from that saying, I don't really want to do that kind of work. I don't find it as satisfying as the stop motion work. And I thought, I'm going to redirect and get into production. I'm going to stop being, a camera assistant or a surveyor or a stage manager and get more into, whatever, just traditional production and work that way. So I did a couple of PAs. I was working on some live action stuff. I was working as a PA on a film called Meet the Robinsons at Disney, and it was kind of their second CG feature after Chicken Little that was not Pixar but their own proprietary kind of like, we're doing this, and just hating life. I mean, I was making shit 50 a week, and it was terrible. I had a terrible boss that was like, that was it was a oil and water dynamic, and I figured that out very early, and I was trying to transition myself out of it and try and get onto another project so I could, try and flourish somewhere else, hopefully. But then there was a separate to like, whatever, keep me from moving forward. So it was like I was kind of stuck there. So, I'm like a year and a half into that project. I know I'm going nowhere. I pretty much know my goose is cooked. That basically, when the job's over, the contract ends, they're going to let me go, and that bridge is burnt, kind of thing. And then I read in the trades, and then it's such a cliche, but Hollywood Reporter and Variety, all those magazines are lying around the office and on these shows. And I saw, there's a production going on in Portland at this new company called Leica that Henry, who directed Nightmare and Peach and a few other films, is going to be getting off the ground. And I wasn't bold enough to reach out to Henry because I was like, he knew me as a camera assistant or PA or something else. So I was much tighter with a fellow named Pete Kazacek, who was the director of photography on Nightmare, who we had become very close friends because I worked under him. He was as the director of photography. I mean, I was a stagehand on Nightmare, so I was working for him indirectly, shared an office with him. Anyway, reached out to him and said, hey, I'm willing to, I'm curious about this project in Portland. What's the deal? And he said, okay, well, let's talk about it. We'll get it going. And of course, things move slowly in animation. So it took a few months to get it going. Monica and I are in our honeymoon, are on our honeymoon in Jamaica. And, it's one of those things like, we're having a great time, but I'm also kind of like, I'm just going to go back to my stupid PA job at Disney when we get back, and she's going to go back to her miserable job, but she was not really happy with the time. And I get an email like the second day in Jamaica saying, "Hey, we want you to come up for an interview to work on this project," which was Coraline. And I like, "Ring, you bet!" Sitting around, and Monica was just like, she's like, "It's so funny." And she comes and it's like, "Your attitude has changed so dramatically just through that one bit of information." She's like, "And I've seen you be this confident before, knowing you before we were dating, whatnot, on other projects. Oh, I'm working on this, but then to see me in the depths and then pop out of it."
So Coraline, for you, as I hear it, was sort of like your memory of what it felt like to be in your strength.
Yes, and a chance to kind of get back and to really contribute and be a vital part of a project. Yeah.
And when I asked you how you felt when you saw the trailer, I was actually more curious, like how emotionally at this very moment in your time and in your life, how does it affect you when you see it?
It's bittersweet. It's bittersweet because that, like I said, that was Leica's first project. They've done about I think 4 other features since then.
But slow down.
Yeah.
I want to get you to your cry space. I want you to look at me.
Okay. Yeah,
and I want to say, like, how do you feel when you see it?
I feel sad because God damn it. I feel sad. My good friend Pete Kazacek, that was the last film he had a chance to really do. And he's around, but he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 5 years ago. And I mean, we went through that with Monica's dad with Parkinson's dementia. It was a long process, and that slow death, that slow loss, that notion of who they were that you forget in the process because they are
they disintegrate.
They're not that person in the moment, and that and not that Pete's not past or anything, but I know, having lost Monica's father, that it's that grieving you have that when they do pass, you're grateful, and then you feel guilty because you feel grateful that their suffering is over. It's so death. I mean, it's such a fucking mind. I'm sorry, that's where when I see Coraline, I think about a loss. I think about loss on a lot of levels. The loss of opportunity, the loss of whatever. That's what comes to mind. So
I could see somehow when you were jumping quickly to the next, I'm like, no, there's something going on. He's not letting me see. What is it not showing? And by the way, thank you. When I said it, I actually didn't literally think it was going to happen. So I was like, wow, that's what really happens when you.
Yeah.
When I've seen.
Andy, we'll just take a deep breath in.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the hardest goodbyes I've seen is the mind fuck of saying goodbye to someone when they're still alive.
Yeah.
Because you project onto a person the love and the person that you knew, and the one you meet in return is nothing like that person, and yet your brain can't reconcile that.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen a lot.
Yeah.
That and suicide, I've seen it really hard for people to make peace within themselves, because everyone says, what else could I do? And on the one case and on the other case, they say, how can I be happy that he's gone, because of now he's ended the suffering, right?
Yeah. I would love to work with you. I would love to. However, but what you do through your work, it's one of those things where I go, gosh, I wish I could.
But you know what I do is those tears that I saw in you, that I was like, I saw you, like, I sort of, I don't like give those tears any weight. It's like, apparently I want to cry like a baby at the moment, and that's what's going on. So there's no attachment to not doing that. So it just happens. And and then the laughter comes. Exactly that.
Well, but it's, how close are tears and laughter? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It is that ultimate expunging of emotion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm close. I'm quick to both. I am quick to both. And I find the older I get, the more I don't want to call it sentimental, but I do find myself prone to tears. And whether it is an empathetic sensibility of the burden of life and living and what's going on in the world, or whether it's the longer I'm around, the more things have a triggering impact on me, whether it's a scene in a movie or a song on the radio or a passage in a book that all of a sudden, that just triggers, like, oh, I'm feeling something that I didn't expect to feel, but I'm okay feeling it. Just feel it.
Yeah.
You can't judge feelings. They really are just there. I mean, you're meant to experience feelings. I think that's our biggest problem in general, is that people putting that shit down. You know what I mean? It's just like, man, that nothing. I mean, smoking will kill you, but an inability to connect with your emotions will do it much quicker and much more painfully.
I know. Yeah, people don't see it. I mean, it sort of seems so obvious to me that I'm always confused when people don't associate emotional well-being with, like, health and physical well-being.
Yeah.
Baffles me.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Thank you for being you.
Thank you for being you.
Olalang came on because he's one of our big fans, and he just said, "What a character!" He's celebrating you. Like
right on.
Death, the ultimate end. Yeah. And then if we say that, there'll be people listening and say, "No, it isn't. No, it isn't."
Well, interesting. You were raised Catholic, right?
Yeah.
I was raised in a religious household on the Protestant side. And the big selling point for Western religion is eternal life, which I got to say, even as a child, and I'm a heretic for saying it, I know, but according to the letter of the law, but I never bought into eternal life. I always felt like I could never rationalize it. In my mind, as a child, as a 7-year-old, that's impossible. So why even entertain that notion?
Mm-hmm.
But what was very apparent to me, even at a very young age, is I'm here now. I have this shot. I have this one shot, as far as I know. And this one has to count. This one has to count. I think one of the lame things that religion does for a lot of people is it gives them the excuse not to participate in this world because I'll get my payoff in the afterlife. And it's just like you missed the golden opportunity, and you missed, I think, from what I can tell after 50 years, the whole fucking point of it. You know what I mean? The whole point of it is to be in this life.
Yeah.
Good or bad. You know what I mean? Yeah. You have to embrace it. Because when you're dead, you don't get any of this stuff. You don't get the joy, the pleasure, the pain, any of it. So
anyway. I tapped Andy's thigh so I can talk.
Please.
Like in this whole hour, since you cried and then you started speaking, like your words came from a much deeper place, and I feel more held. Like, and I have to acknowledge that I really struggled staying connected to this episode.
Okay.
Nothing personal with you, but there was a lot of excitement, and I had to really focus, and I so I really like, okay, breathe, Bumble, breathe, Bumble, breathe, Bumble, breathe, Bumble. But once you dropped into this other space of vulnerability, wow, whatever you had to say was like heartfelt.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. That's why I said to him when he was talking, I could see I was asking you questions, and then you would jump into the explanation of things, but not let them sit inside of you and come from like almost like, Andy, I don't want to go there, so I'm going to go to the part that's protected. I don't want to go there, so I'm going to go to the part that's protected.
Well, I'll admit that's a tactic of mine. It's part of being the youngest child, where I feel like I kind of have to constantly entertain.
You're doing it again.
I know, you're right. No, you're right. Call bullshit. No, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but I would almost venture to say, remember the time you got really angry at the individual that cost you a lot of work afterwards?
Yeah.
Like, that built up over so much time because you suppressed it. And then when it came out contorted. So the humor is, it's almost like embracing that you were frustrated in the moment and living it then. Obviously would never have come out in this big outburst. It would have just showed up daily, like, come on, you're really being, like, it would almost be like you didn't give yourself permission all these little times. It became this massive blowout at the end.
No, I have a really bad habit of letting things fester and then blow at the most inopportune point.
I'd love to photograph you in that moment.
I'm sure there's footage somewhere. Because the thing, struggling with having, I mean, my dad had a massive temper as well. So I was also, I was raised with that notion too. And he and I are similar in the notion that once I lose my temper, I'm fine. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I don't really look around and realize I've just carpet bombed the household, and everybody else is crying in the corner because of what they just witnessed. And now when I see that or start feeling that temptation or that frustration build, I just opt to remove myself from it, because I realize that once I have lost my temper and gotten to that point, I've lost the argument. My point is lost. All of my concerns I'm trying to express and everything that I'm angry about are completely wasted, and no one hears that. They just hear, and
then they live in fear afterwards, because they're and you think that maybe they even understood you, but they didn't understand you. They just didn't want to trigger that emotion anymore. So then there's fear that rises.
Yeah, well, and that then tends to be the lingering memory versus the 95 or 99 or whatever. The majority of the time when I'm trying to be affable and fast talking and friendly and tell you a story, and let me tell you, that kind of bullshit that I rely on inherently to kind of like keep things away. Which this is why I'd like to work with you, Andy and Mom.
Working with us is basically like just being at peace with what's going on, right? And then like laughing together, not trying to psychoanalyze it too much, and just sort of being, this is just where we are at this moment. I don't know if you know Chris Ramsey, but he says, what is this? Some sort of parade in here?
Chris is one of my dearest, oldest friends from middle school growing up. He lives in the East Coast now, in the Boston area. That is one of my father's quotes. He would, he would.
Right in here.
If he'd have friends come by and pass, my dad would be, sitting in his underwear, watching television. There was a parade here. Everybody's fucking walking around the house. I'm sitting there watching. Yeah.
I love it.
So, gentlemen, we've come to the end of our hour.
Yes, we have.
Beautiful. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, both.
Now I'm gonna watch the Nightmare Christmas one.
Mm-hmm.
Watch Nightmare. It's that kind of had a stronger connection to the greater zeitgeist.
Should I wait till the Christmas period so I could get really into the mood?
No, I mean, no. No need.
Yeah. By the way, one last thing. You said you were reading, or you read The Last Letter.
Yes.
And you obviously read all of the things that I had to deal with my dad. So I imagine for you, it must have also been quite similar.
It was, yeah. There was a number of things that I felt like, oh man, I could totally feel Andy and this passage.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love you, man.
Love you too, brother. Love you too, Mambos.
Love your family. Actually, the Lowe family is kind of my favorite family in the world, pretty much. You know,
they're pretty darn special. I'll tell you. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Big hug.
Big hug.
I think on the hours, some hours I want to extend longer.
Yeah, once we drove into that space, right?
Yeah. I think I would have gone to like 1:15 probably on this. Because if we, it's the unintended thing. Like as I asked, from the cry space, I didn't know that he was going to touch that. It was kind of like a desire to get him more grounded. I didn't actually realize that the grounding would touch something sensitive that would then move him in a whole other way. And in doing that, of course, for me, I want to stay with a person as long as it takes to have that be, as we did here.
Oh, so why did you just?
Oh, because I just let it be. And I like that we discuss it on air. I don't have any. It's more. It's the one thing I love about how we're operating is that I don't even want to have any thing not shared. Right? It's kind of, this is the beauty of it. And to be with someone like Kirk is sort of like to see again and again and again the similar thing running through, where people really stumble upon things unintentionally, and then they sort of create a life. And it's so hard, and I've seen in this land and world of live your true purpose. You can do this, you can do that, and all the people we've had on who've been really successful, they just lived, they focused, they worked hard, and all of a sudden they stumbled on things that they gravitated towards, and then they made a really beautiful life from that. And I'm always finding it so fascinating because it's so counter to how all of the people selling products in the world exist today. I need to give you a sense of scarcity. I need to give you a feeling that you need something that I have, and then through that, I fill the gap with course, a training, a coaching session, and so on. And it's just beautiful to see that from 10 years old, he's watching Star Wars, putting posters on the walls, and then that is basically what he's attracted to his life. It's incredible. Yeah. For you?
When he came on, like behind the scenes, we just had a really good chat. Like it was really back then. And but I have to admit, what I just shared was I did feel disconnected from the show.
Yeah,
but nothing to do with Kirk, but more I really struggle a lot of times if we have a guest and it's information or sharing personal from past. I have a struggle there, so I see it also as a practice for myself to really get more in my body while being in that, stay grounded in that.
Yeah, we talked about that a few times. In some ways, if one needs another to be a certain way for one to feel comfortable, then there's a codependency that can arise. I need that for this to be.
And that's why I'm not imposing anything. I see it really as a practice to stay with my breath.
Yeah, or the alternative is also to say, where do I feel like I can connect to this in a way that will deepen it without necessarily not also taking the other into account, which is different practices that I don't want to self-sacrifice and I also don't want to impose. And that's how I tend to want to live. And you're always obviously invited to introduce whatever it is you feel like you see or you desire or you're curious about. And I think the balance where people get stuck is when they resist and they say, I'm not getting what I need from this, then the reaction creates a aversion. You push the other away. So instead of just saying, I'm not getting what I want, it's more of the welcoming of, hey guys, I'd love to hear something more in this direction. How do you feel about taking it there?
Yeah, the way you. So I haven't done that because I couldn't find the words, and now I hear you share that in that way. I feel the spaciousness in me.
Yeah, because I'll do that all the time. If I'm in a situation where there's a lot of information, I say openly, I just shut down. I just tell people I'm not really paying attention anymore. I do.
Yeah, I know.
You do. You see me do it. And I do that because I sort of realize I work from this more feeling space. So if I feel another person, then that feeling starts to says, oh, I know where they are right now. I can feel it in myself. So if I'm talking to them, a lot of times I'm not feeling it. I'm just in my head.
Yeah.
And that's not a problem. I haven't judged it in myself or others. But then I'll sometimes ask, hey, is it okay if we move in this direction without imposing it? Because I also know if people feel the imposition, then they feel then I generate resistance to that.
Yeah, and it's really a fine balance, making sure that at least for myself, I want to make sure that our guests feel really comfortable on the show.
Yeah, and it's the interesting thing because with a guest, like, I can go any direction with a guest. It is a wonderful chaos. If we talk about, issues that have nothing to do with the title of the show, I'm cool with that. But I also don't want to ever feel like anyone would be imposed to go in a direction. Otherwise, then it's not a dialogue anymore. It becomes us trying to get somewhere, get someone somewhere. And that's just not what I'm ever about.
Yeah.
Just meeting people where they are and seeing where we can move together. And if we deepen or we don't deepen, it's also perfect. Yeah. Cool. It's nice to do our summary on this live. So is that can we leave it there?
Guys, have a beautiful Thursday.
Is it Thursday?
Thursday.
I have no idea what day it is.
It's Thursday.
Wow. Tomorrow, who do we have on tomorrow, Bambo?
Josh.
We have Josh Witten, Saving the Planet. Josh has got several cool projects. We're going to talk to him about them tomorrow, especially composting, and we're going to do that on
a wonderful chaos.
Ciao.